Greetings, I'm Scarlett here. Today we are going to do an introduction to point-slope form of a linear equation. So hopefully you know that a linear equation is an equation of a line, and lines can be diagonal, horizontal, or vertical. And if they're horizontal or vertical, they only have one of the variables. Horizontal lines only have y's, vertical lines only have x's. What I need you to notice is that this point-slope form has a y and an x. It has an m, which stands for our slope, and then it has an x sub 1 and a y sub 1. Remember, subscripts in math tell you which one. So the x sub 1 is the x-coordinate of a point on the line. The y sub 1 is the y-coordinate of the point on the line. So when you look at an equation in point-slope form, you can see a point on the line and you can see a slope, the slope of the line. So it's really one of the easier ones to use if you're asked to write an equation of a line, because if they give you a point and a slope, all you're doing is plugging the x-coordinate, the y-coordinate, and the slope in, and you're done. You don't have to solve for y, you don't have to do any arithmetic, you're done. So that's what's nice. Well, this is just an introduction. So we're not writing equations. The introduction is just how to find that information out if you have an equation in point-slope form. So I'm going to ask you to find the slope and the point of the line, and then I'm going to give you a point and a slope and ask you to write the equation. So we're going to do these 4 problems first. What's tricky about this is that this is x sub 1, but there's a minus sign in the formula before the x sub 1. Notice there's no negative here. The minus signs are part of the formula. So when you see a minus 3, that means your x is actually 3. And if you see an x plus 3, that actually means your x is negative 3. So that's the tricky part. We'll talk about it a little bit as we go through the problems. So the directions say find the point and the slope. Well, the slope is just staring at us. The slope is 2/3. It's always going to be found in point-slope form right in front of the parentheses on the right side next to the parentheses with an x in it. Then I have to find the point. So I have to remember that in my formula it said minus, and then this was my x sub 1. So my x sub 1 is 5. And then it said minus 12, so my y sub 1 is 12. So my point is 5/12, and my slope is 2/3. Okay, let's try the next one. The slope is super easy. It's the one in front of the parentheses. That's negative 2. And now I'm going to find the point. So remember, if it says minus 1, I know my coordinate is 1. But if it said plus 1, if the original formula, which was minus, how do I get a plus? I would have had to say minus a negative 4, and then that would have been my y-coordinate. So I have to remember it's the opposite of what I see there. So be careful with that. Okay, let's do this one. The slope is the number right here, negative 1/4. And the point, always use parentheses, always use a comma to separate the x-coordinate from the y-coordinate. The x says plus 3, that means I know it had to have been a negative 3. This one says plus 6, so I know it had to have been a negative 6. So that's my point. And then right here, I'm going to find the slope. So the slope is the number in front. Well, what happens if there isn't a number in front? There's just a negative sign. That means the slope is negative 1. And remember, if there's not a 1 there, it's because 1 times that is just that. 1 times anything. So it's not really considered simplified to have a 1 there. So sometimes there's just a negative sign. And then what is our point? Well, x is negative 11, but notice there's nothing next to the y. Well, what could be added to y so that it would still be y? The only thing is 0. Anything else you add or subtract, there would be a number there. So my point is negative 11, 0, and my slope is negative 1. Now you can see how easy it would be to graph if you knew the point and the slope, because you could graph this point, and then you use the slope, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, whoops, other way, to graph the line. So that we will talk about later, but you can kind of see that with a point and a slope, just like you did with the y-intercept, which is a point and a slope, it was easy to find. So next we're going to write equations. So hopefully you have kept this little formula in mind. That's definitely one you want to memorize. So here we go. We're going to say, write an equation in point-slope form of a line that has a slope of negative 2 and goes through the point 1, negative 7. Well, first of all, we always have a y, we always have an equals, we always have a parenthesis. The slope goes right here. The y-coordinate, it's going to be minus a negative 7. Well, what is minus a negative 7? So if that's a negative, this is going to be a plus 7. And then we're going to say x minus 1 because that was positive, so it's minus 1. And that's our equation. That's all you have to do. Done. All right, over here, y minus the y, but there's a 0, so we're just going to leave it, equals 1/4 times x minus a negative 3. Okay, so then that would change to a positive 3. And that's the equation. So this is just an introduction, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Next time, we'll step it up a notch and write equations where you have 2 points and not just a slope and a point. Good luck. I'm Squared signing out.